Greetings, traveler. My name is Sir Belgard, and I am the last knight. Tonight I will tell a story that was inspired by the life story of the famous Roksolana, a simple slave girl who later became the beloved wife of Sultan Suleiman. My story will be a medieval adaptation of this story. If, of course, your heart is brave and your mind sharp. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more exciting stories. And let's begin. The black banners rose above Castle Shtarburg, flapping in the icy wind like ravens circling a battlefield. The people of the city below froze in dread, for they knew what those banners meant. Someone would meet their end today, and the square was already filled with whispers, prayers, and the nervous shuffling of boots on cobblestones. Mothers pulled their children closer, merchants closed their stalls, and old men muttered that nothing good ever followed when the Duke ordered the black banners raised. But when the gates of the castle opened, it was not a condemned thief or traitor who was dragged into the courtyard. Instead, a slender figure appeared between armored guards, chains clinking with every step. She was young, foreign, with skin pale from travel and eyes that burned not with fear but with defiance. Her name, the herald declared, was Miroslava. She walked tall, though her wrists bore heavy iron shackles. The people fell into stunned silence. Who was she? Why would the Duke darken the sky with banners for her? The Duke of Shtarburg, Leon, descended from his dais, his heavy cloak sweeping across the stone floor as the wind tugged at its crimson hem. His voice, stern yet strangely uncertain, echoed through the courtyard. "Remove her chains." The guards hesitated, but his command was sharper than steel. Shackles fell to the ground with a hollow clang. Miroslava lifted her wrists, rubbing the red marks left by the iron, and raised her gaze to meet the Duke's. For a heartbeat that seemed endless, either looked away. The crowd watched, holding its breath, waiting for the thunder of accusation. Yet no such words came. Instead, Leon's tone softened, though it carried weight enough to hush the courtyard. "You are far from home, stranger. Tell me, why should your life matter so much that fate has brought you here in chains?" The girl's voice was clear, unbroken, and filled with fire. "My life matters not for what I am, but for what I know. If you cast me aside, your enemies will triumph before the moon has turned twice. But if you allow me to live, Duke Leon, I may yet save this land that is not mine." A murmur swept through the crowd like a gust of wind. Some called her a prophetess, others a deceiver. But all saw the calm in her eyes, the strange certainty of one who feared nothing, not even death. Duchess Isolde, standing at Leon's side, leaned close and whispered, her words laced with venom. "My lord, she is a sorceress or a spy. Such fire in her gaze does not belong to the innocent. Do not let her linger here. End this spectacle before she poisons our people with false hope." But Leon, though torn between duty and instinct, raised his hand to silence his wife. His eyes never left Miroslava. He saw pride there, yes, but also something that unsettled him, truth. A truth he could not yet name. "Take her to the Western Tower," he commanded. "The days ahead will tell us whether she is a gift to Shtarburg, or a curse upon it." The banners still hung above the castle, black as omen, but their meaning had shifted. Question had been born, sharp as a sword and heavy as a crown. Who was Miroslava, and why had fate chosen Shtarburg as the stage for her story? The western tower of Castle Shtarburg rose high above the walls, its narrow windows watching the world like tired eyes that had seen too much. It was no dungeon, yet neither was it a place of comfort. Cold winds crawled through the stone, and the iron door creaked like the groan of an old warrior wounded long ago. Into this tower Miroslava was led, unshackled but still watched by guards who gripped their spears as though the girl before them might conjure storms with a mere glance. Inside, she found not solitude, but a girl of the castle, a servant named Adelia, whose kind face softened the harshness of the place. Adelia was young, her hands rough from endless chores, yet her voice carried warmth, and her smile was a fragile lantern in the gloom of stone walls. "My lady," Adelia said softly, bowing as though to someone far above her station. "I have been sent to tend to you, though I do not know why the Duke treats a prisoner with such mercy. If you wish for food or warmth, I will bring what I can." Miroslava regarded her not as a servant but as another soul, and her reply carried no trace of arrogance. "Do not bow to me, Adelia. I am no lady. I am a wanderer who has lost her road. If you will call me friend, then I shall call you the same." These words startled the servant girl, for in Shtarburg, nobles rarely spoke thus. Yet something in Miroslava's voice, something both proud and humble, awakened trust where fear had lived. And so in that lonely tower the first bond was forged, fragile as a thread, but strong enough to hold against suspicion. Not long after, Leon himself came to the tower, accompanied by his young scribe, a solemn man named Rudolph who carried parchments like a knight carried his sword. But it was not Rudolph who first noticed the secret of the stranger. It was Leon's own brother, Lord Leonard, who tested her with a question meant to unravel her. He laid a parchment before her, covered in lines of Latin, the language of scholars and priests. "Can you read this?" he asked, expecting confusion. But Miroslava's eyes scanned the words, and she recited them aloud with perfect clarity. When he pressed further, offering a Greek manuscript worn by age, she not only translated but explained its meaning with insight beyond her years. The chamber grew silent. Rudolph's eyes widened. Leonard muttered an oath of surprise. Only Leon himself stood still, his expression hidden in shadow. At last he spoke. "A peasant girl who reads the tongues of scholars? Either you are a miracle, or a danger." Miroslava did not flinch. "I am no danger unless you make me one. The words I carry are not weapons but knowledge, and knowledge can save or destroy, depending on the hand that wields it." Her reply lingered in the air like the toll of a distant bell. Adelia, listening from the corner, felt her heart beat faster, sensing that her new friend was walking a narrow road where each word could mean salvation or death. And then, as if compelled by the weight of their stares, Miroslava revealed a fragment of her story. "I was born in a city where towers shone with marble and bells spoke in Latin, where priests argued over scripture while soldiers sharpened swords for war. My father was a scholar, a keeper of ancient books, and my mother was taken from the East, a woman who carried with her songs and stories in a tongue no one else could speak. From them I learned to weave words together, Greek from one, Latin from another, and the tongues of wanderers who passed through our door. When our city fell to fire and steel, I fled, carrying not wealth but the burden of memory. I walked through kingdoms, hiding in monasteries, listening to the tongues of many lands, gathering every word I could as though it were bread for the journey. And when the soldiers of Baron Conrad seized me, I was brought here, not as a guest but as a prize." Her voice faltered only once, when she spoke of fire and steel, but her gaze never broke. Leon watched her closely, weighing every word, searching for the thread of deceit, yet finding none. At last, he leaned closer, his voice low, almost a warning. "You must understand, stranger, that in this castle knowledge is sharper than steel. Many will fear you for it, and some will seek to see you silenced. If you wish to survive here, you must tread with care." But Miroslava only lifted her chin, her eyes unwavering. "I have walked through shadows far darker than this tower, my lord. If danger comes, I will not bow before it. For what I carry is not only for me, it is for all who have the courage to listen." And so the mystery deepened. In the tower, among stone and silence, a girl with chains newly broken revealed a gift rare and dangerous, the power of knowledge. Some would call it light. Others would call it sorcery. But all would feel its weight. The question was no longer who Miroslava was, but whether Shtarburg was ready for what she had brought with her. The stone halls of Castle Shtarburg had always carried echoes, boots striking on flagstones, torches hissing in their brackets, servants murmuring as they hurried from one chamber to another. Yet in the days after Miroslava's arrival, those echoes changed. They were no longer the ordinary sounds of a fortress at work, but the hushed and uneasy murmurs of people whose imaginations were fed by fear. "She speaks the tongues of the ancients," some whispered in the kitchens. "She was brought here in chains, yet the Duke freed her," muttered others in the stables. Perhaps she is not even mortal at all, said the washerwomen, their eyes darting toward the tower whenever the wind carried the faint notes of Miroslava's voice. The rumors thickened like mist, creeping from hall to hall until even the guards exchanged wary glances when her name was spoken. No one fueled this fire more than Duchess Isolde. Regal, sharp as ice, and merciless in her suspicion, she watched Miroslava from afar with eyes that held neither trust nor pity. At feasts she would rise gracefully, her jeweled hand resting upon Leon's arm, and speak in tones that carried through the hall. "My lord, it is not wisdom but folly to keep such a creature beneath our roof. Who but a sorceress could have learned so many tongues, and at so young an age? And who but a deceiver would charm the people with strange stories while we sit blind to her true purpose?" But Leon, wearied by her venom, would only reply with patience, "She has brought no harm, Isolde. Until she does, she remains under my protection." The Duchess's smile was delicate, but her voice carried the weight of steel. "Until harm comes, you mean. But when it does, it will be too late to stop it." Meanwhile, Miroslava, confined within her tower yet allowed to walk the inner courtyards under guard, began to notice the way people recoiled at her passing. She saw servants make the sign of the cross as she approached, soldiers lowering their voices, children being pulled away by anxious mothers. Yet among all the mistrust, there was one who did not turn his face from her, young Rudolph, the knight's son who carried both sword and parchment with equal grace. One evening, as the shadows lengthened and the last torch in the courtyard sputtered, Rudolph found her sitting beneath the twisted branches of an old yew tree. Her face was calm, yet her eyes betrayed the weight she carried. "You know they whisper against you," Rudolph said, his voice low but steady. "They fear what they cannot understand. To them, wisdom itself is a form of magic." Miroslava turned her gaze upon him, and though her voice was gentle, her words cut with quiet power. "If they fear knowledge, Rudolph, then their fear is not of me but of the truth. Shall I bow because they tremble? Shall I silence my tongue because they cannot bear to hear it?" He clenched his fists, caught between loyalty to his lord and the pull of her defiance. "I do not wish you silenced. But I fear for you. The Duchess's shadow is long, and those who fall beneath it rarely rise again. If you stand alone against her, you will not survive." A faint smile touched Miroslava's lips, though sorrow lingered in her eyes. "Then I shall not stand alone. You are here." Rudolph faltered, his heart stirred by words he had not expected. He looked upon her not as the stranger others feared, but as a soul unyielding against the tide of suspicion. Yet even as their bond grew, so too did the whispers. In the great hall, in the chapel, in the barracks, the name of Miroslava was carried in tones of dread. Some spoke of her as a blessing, others as a curse. But none could deny that she had become the silent heart of the castle's unrest. And high in her chamber, Isolde listened to these whispers with cold delight, for each rumor was a sword she could turn against the girl. The Duchess's eyes gleamed with resolve. Miroslava had entered Shtarburg in chains. Soon, Isolde vowed, she would leave it in shame. Night fell heavily upon Castle Shtarburg, draping its towers in silence and shadow. The torches on the battlements flickered in the wind, their flames bending as though the very air carried secrets too dangerous to be spoken aloud. Inside, the great halls slumbered, but not all within the walls sought rest. Some lingered in the hidden chambers, whispering words not meant for the Duke's ears. It was there, in the stillness of the southern cloister, that Duchess Isolde met with Baron Conrad, Leon's bitter rival. He was a man of broad shoulders and restless eyes, wearing his cloak like a wolf hides its hunger, thick, concealing, but never able to mask what lurked beneath. His voice, though measured, carried venom in every syllable. "You grow impatient, my lady. But patience is the coin of victory. Leon is cautious. He trusts too easily, even when his own household warns him. It is that weakness we must use." Isolde's smile glimmered in the dim candlelight, cold and elegant. "And the stranger? The girl who came to us in chains? She has already captured his attention. She reads his parchments, she walks his halls, she wins the favor of his knights. If we allow her to remain, She will be the root from which his strength grows anew. Conrad's hand clenched upon the hilt of his dagger. Then the root must be cut before it spreads. Leon listens to her now, but if she were silenced, he might lose not only her counsel but his people's faith as well. The Duchess leaned closer, her voice a silken thread of poison. Not yet. If she vanishes too quickly, suspicion will fall upon us. We must let her remain long enough for the whispers to turn to fear, fear to hatred. Then we will need only one spark to burn her name to ash. What neither of them knew was that the shadows had ears. Miroslava, restless in her chamber, had wandered the halls in silence, her feet soft upon the stones. She had followed the faint glow of their candlelight, drawn by an instinct she could not name, until she stood just beyond the alcove, listening to fragments of their words. She could not hear every sentence, but what she caught chilled her heart. Plots, venom, the weaving of a snare meant not only for her, but for Leon himself. Her breath trembled, yet she did not retreat. She pressed herself against the cold wall, straining to hear more, until Conrad's voice sharpened like steel. The people will follow fear more quickly than reason. Already they call her a sorceress. Already they whisper that Leon has lost his mind. When the time comes, it will be too late for him to turn their hearts back. A door creaked somewhere down the hall. A guard's footsteps echoed faintly, breaking the spell of conspiracy. Miroslava slipped back into the shadows like a ghost, her heart pounding, her mind racing with the weight of what she had overheard. Yet when she returned to her chamber, fear clawed at her resolve. She knew that if she spoke, none would believe her. To accuse the Duchess and a baron without proof would be to condemn herself. And so she sat in silence, staring out through the narrow window at the moon, her thoughts heavy with dread. Adelia found her there at dawn, pale and sleepless. "You look as if you've seen the disaster itself," the servant whispered. Miroslava turned, her voice quiet yet heavy with truth. "I have not seen disaster, Adelia. But I have heard its footsteps in the halls of this castle. And soon, it will not be content to whisper, it will come knocking at our gates." The days that followed were heavy with unease. The people of Shtarburg went about their lives beneath grey skies, but every conversation seemed to circle back to one name, Baron Conrad. Merchants spoke of his soldiers gathering on the borderlands. Farmers whispered that his men rode through their fields, seizing grain in the name of tax. Even the children, too young to understand war, played games of siege outside the walls, piling stones and pretending to storm the gates. Then came the herald. Clad in Conrad's colors, he rode into the city square, his trumpet blaring before he unfurled a parchment, and read aloud words that fell like thunder. "By order of Baron Conrad, rightful lord of these lands, Duke Leon is commanded to yield half his territories, or else face the just punishment of war." The people gasped. Some shouted in anger, others fell into fearful silence. For all knew Conrad's strength. His army was vast, fed by mercenaries who cared nothing for loyalty, only for coin. If his banners marched toward Shtarburg, the city would be swallowed in fire and ruin. In the great hall, the parchment lay upon the duke's table, its seal broken, its words awound upon the air. Leon stood at its head, his jaw set, his eyes burning with restrained fury. Around him, his lords argued, voices clashing like swords. "We cannot withstand his numbers," cried one. "To yield is to live," urged another. Isolde, ever poised, raised her voice above them all, her tones sweet as honey and sharp as venom. "My lord, perhaps it is time to ask whether this city is worth the blood it would cost. Shtarburg is but stone and earth. Better to live under Conrad's hand than to see our people buried beneath our pride." Leon's fist struck the table, silencing the hall. "Better to fight with honor than to kneel before a thief who calls himself rightful lord. These lands are not Conrad's, nor shall they ever be." The lords fell silent, but their eyes betrayed their fear. Even Rudolph, standing near the duke's chair, felt the weight of despair pressing upon his shoulders. And in the corner of the hall, unnoticed until she spoke, Miroslava stepped forward. "My lord," she said, her voice calm yet strong, "I have seen despair in the eyes of your people. They look to you for strength, but they see only fear mirrored back. If you allow Conrad's banners to march unchallenged, Shtarburg will not only fall, it will lose its soul. Leon turned to her, torn between anger and something deeper, hope, perhaps, though he dared not name it. Tell me then, stranger. Tell me how we are to face an army twice our size, with mercenaries who care not for loyalty, only for gold. Miroslava's gaze sharpened. Gold is their master, and gold may yet be their undoing. But before you trust me, you must hear this: Conrad does not seek your lands alone. He seeks to break you, to take not your walls but your people's faith. That is the true battle you must fight, my lord, the battle for their hearts. The hall erupted again in debate, voices rising like a storm. Some mocked her words as folly, others whispered that perhaps wisdom lay in them. But the seed had been planted. That night Miroslava walked the ramparts, the chill wind biting her skin. Below, the city lay restless, its streets filled with prayers and curses. She saw faces pale with dread, children clinging to their mothers, old men sharpening rusted swords they could barely lift. And in that moment she knew, if she did nothing, Shtarburg would fall not by sword, but by despair. The people were already defeated in their hearts. Adelia found her there, her voice trembling. Miroslava, is there hope for us? The stranger's eyes turned toward the horizon, where she knew Conrad's banners gathered. There is always hope, Adelia. But sometimes, hope must be fought for. And if no one else will fight for it, then I must. The great hall of Shtarburg was heavy with the scent of smoke and sweat, the air choked with the dread of war. Duke Leon sat upon his chair like a man carved from stone, listening to his council argue until their voices grew hoarse. Maps were spread across the long table, stained with candle wax and trembling hands, showing Conrad's forces encircling the city like a tightening noose. The lords spoke of walls and battlements, of rations and sacrifices, but all their words carried only the echo of despair. Into this storm of fear, Miroslava's voice cut like the toll of a bell. You speak of swords and walls as though they are the only weapons at hand. But have you forgotten who stands beneath Conrad's banners? They are not loyal knights sworn to him by blood. They are sellswords, mercenaries who fight for coin, not for honor. And men who fight for coin may be persuaded to lay down their swords. The chamber fell silent. Lords turned to stare at her as if she had spoken madness. One slammed his fist upon the table, his voice dripping with scorn. Shall we invite wolves to leave the hunt by offering them our own throats? Mercenaries are vultures, girl. They will not be swayed by words. But Miroslava did not waver. She stepped closer, her eyes fixed upon Leon. They can be swayed, if not by fear then by reason. For they know as well as we do that Conrad's hunger will never be sated. Today he bids them march against Shtarburg. Tomorrow, he will turn his gaze upon them, demanding blood that is not his to command. If they are wise, they will see that Conrad is not a lord who rewards loyalty, but a master who devours it. Leon's jaw tightened, his brow furrowed with the weight of uncertainty. At last he spoke, his voice low and guarded. You would walk into their camp alone? You would speak to men whose hands are stained with the blood of every land they've touched? One word out of place, and you would not leave their fire alive. Miroslava's reply was steady, her eyes unbroken. Better to risk my life once than to see thousands risk theirs for nothing. Give me a chance, my lord, and I will try. If I fail, then the sword will decide our fate as it always has. But if I succeed, then Shtarburg may yet be spared. The council erupted in protest, voices crashing like waves against rock. Some shouted that she was mad, others that it was treason to entrust the city's fate to a foreign stranger. But in the corner, young Rudolph rose to his feet, his voice cutting through the clamor. If she goes, then I will go with her. If her plan is folly, then I will answer for it with my life. But if it is wisdom, then Shtarburg owes her more than chains and suspicion. The hall fell into uneasy silence. Leon's gaze passed between them, Miroslava, standing proud though she wore no crown, and Rudolph, his hand upon the hilt of his sword though his heart was untested. The Duke's voice carried the weight of command, yet also of trust reluctantly given. Very well. You will go at dawn. If you return, you may yet save us. If you do not. He did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. And so, before the first light touched the horizon, Miroslava and Rudolf rode out under the cover of mist, leaving behind the looming walls of Shtarburg for the dark sea of tents that sprawled across the valley. Torches burned there like eyes in the night, and the clang of iron echoed like the heartbeat of war. As they approached, Rudolf's grip tightened upon his sword, his voice low with unease. They will not greet us with open hands, Miroslava. They will see only two souls ripe for ransom, or worse. But she turned to him with a calm that unsettled him more than fear. Then let them see what they will. If we walk into their camp as supplicants, we are already lost. But if we walk as though we belong to fate itself, perhaps fate will carry us through. The mist curled around them as they rode into the lion's den, two figures against an army, carrying not weapons nor shields, but a daring idea that could either save Shtarburg, or doom it forever. When the gates of Shtarburg opened at dawn, the people poured into the streets as though drawn by an invisible thread. They had heard the rumors in the night, that the mercenary host had broken their camp, that Conrad's banners had turned away from the city without a single arrow loosed. At first, none dared believe it. But when Miroslava and Rudolf rode through the gates, weary yet unbroken, the truth was plain to all. The city erupted. Bells rang from the towers, voices lifted in joy, and the words spread like wildfire. The stranger had saved them. No siege, no famine, no blood in the streets. The sorceress, who had once been whispered against, was now named the savior of Shtarburg. Mothers lifted their children to see her, merchants threw coins in her path, soldiers saluted her as though she were born to command. For the first time, Miroslava smiled, not in pride, but in relief. She had gambled with fate, and fate had spared the city. Yet even as she walked among the rejoicing crowd, she saw the shadow in their joy. The mercenaries had left, yes, but Conrad remained, and men such as he never forgive humiliation. This peace was only a pause before the next storm. In the great hall, Leon received her not as a captive but as a counselor. His voice, once guarded, now carried respect. You stood before men who would slit a throat for a copper, and you spoke to them as though they were kings. And they listened. Tell me, Miroslava, what power is this that you wield? She bowed her head slightly, her words calm. No power but the truth, my lord. Men who fight for coin know the worth of their own blood. I only reminded them that Conrad would spend it freely, while you would not. Leon studied her, and for the first time, his stern eyes softened. Then perhaps truth is the rarest power of all. Stay by my side, stranger. I have need of such counsel. But as Leon's trust grew, so too did Isolde's fury. She stood at his side, her hands clasped so tightly that her jeweled rings cut into her skin. Her voice was smooth, but her eyes burned like coals. My lord, must we raise up a foreign girl above those who have served you faithfully for years? She knows nothing of our land, our people, our ways. You place our fate in the hands of one who may yet betray us. Leon did not turn to her. His gaze lingered only on Miroslava. She has done more for Shtarburg in a single night than many have in a lifetime. That is not betrayal. That is loyalty. Isolde's lips curved into a cold smile, but inside her heart raged like a storm. To see her husband's eyes soften toward another, even if not in love then in trust, was more than she could bear. Miroslava had stolen the people, the council, and now Leon himself. The Duchess swore then, in silence, that she would not rest until the girl was broken. That night, as torches flickered along the walls and the city still feasted in celebration, Isolde stood alone in her chamber, staring into the darkness. Her voice was no longer smooth, but raw with hatred. She came in chains. She will leave in chains. And if the Duke himself must weep for her, then so be it. I will not share my throne with a stranger. Thus, even as the city sang Miroslava's name, another song was being written in secret, the song of jealousy sharpened into a dagger. The bells of Shtarburg that once rang for joy now tolled with unease. The church had spoken. Words spread quickly. The stranger was to be judged. Not by steel, but by faith. It was the bishop himself who came to the castle, a man robed in crimson and gold, his face lined with years of piety and suspicion. He bowed to Duke Leon, yet his gaze slid past him and rested upon Miroslava. In his eyes burned not hatred, but the cold flame of doubt. "My lord," he said gravely, "your people call her savior, yet some whisper she is a witch. Truth and heresy wear the same cloak until torn apart by fire. The church cannot allow such whispers to fester. We must test her, lest Shtarburg mistake a curse for a blessing." The hall fell silent. The lords shifted uneasily, the servants crossed themselves, and even Leon's voice trembled with restrained anger. "She saved this city without bloodshed. Would you repay her with suspicion?" The bishop's reply was calm, but it carried the weight of command. "I would repay her with truth. If she is innocent, let her prove it. If she is guilty, better we know now than when her shadow darkens us all." Miroslava stepped forward before Leon could answer. Her voice was steady, her eyes unflinching. "If the church doubts me, then I will face their questions. For truth fears no trial." Thus, before the altar of the great cathedral, she stood. The people gathered in hushed awe, filling the pews and spilling into the square outside, their breath held as the bishop raised his voice. "Tell us, stranger, do you bring light or darkness to Shtarburg? Do you claim to act by the will of heaven, or by powers unnamed?" The moment was heavy as stone, but Miroslava's voice rang clear. "I claim nothing but the burden of my journey. I am not a prophet, nor a witch. I am only a wanderer who has carried words from one land to another, as a merchant carries wares across the sea. If wisdom lies in those words, it is not mine but given by those who came before me. And if I have brought light, it is not from spells or omens, but from the courage to speak when others would stay silent." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some nodded, others frowned. The bishop's eyes narrowed. "Fine words, child, but words feed no mouths. If you are truly a blessing, then let your blessing be seen. Your people are hungry. The fields yield little after Conrad's raids. Can you bring bread where there is none?" The challenge hung in the air. Even Leon's heart faltered, for what could she do? Yet Miroslava did not tremble. She turned to the people, her voice carrying not command, but conviction. "If the city hungers, then we must look not to miracles but to each other. Grain lies hoarded in Conrad's camps, guarded by men who demand coin while our children starve. Then let us take it, not with blood, but with boldness. I will go to the traitors who fear to cross his banners. I will find food where none dare to look. If you doubt me, then watch." And so she did. With Rudolph at her side, she sought out merchants, bargained with stubborn guilds, and even risked the road beyond the city walls. Within a fortnight, wagons rolled through the gates, grain, flour, salt, and dried meat enough to feed the city through the coming winter. The bells rang again, this time in triumph. The people cheered her name. Mothers wept with relief, and children clutched crusts of bread as though they were jewels. But in the shadow of the cathedral, Isolde watched with eyes of fire. What the Duchess could not destroy with whispers, Miroslava had turned into victory. Each cheer for the stranger was a knife in her pride. And as the crowd cried out, "Blessing! Savior!" Isolde's lips shaped another word in silence. Enemy. Winter winds clawed at the towers of Shtarburg, rattling shutters and howling through the chimneys like restless spirits. Inside the castle, fires burned bright, yet warmth did not reach every heart. For while the people sang Miroslava's name in gratitude, another name whispered through the corridors with venom: Isolde. The Duchess had bided her time, weaving threads of deceit with the patience of a spider. Each whisper, each doubtful glance, each subtle word planted in the ears of lords and servants had been her work. And now, with her pride shattered and her influence waning, she gathered those threads into a single, deadly snare. In the dark of her chamber, she spoke with her allies, minor lords whose envy of Leon's favor made them easy prey. Baron Conrad's envoys, cloaked and silent, were there as well, promising wealth and titles should Miroslava be cast out. Isolde's voice was sharp and cold as steel. Tomorrow we will act. The girl has poisoned Leon's mind and stolen the hearts of the people. But hearts are fickle. With the right spark, they will turn on her as swiftly as they embraced her. We shall give them that spark. What will you do, my lady? Asked one of the lords, his face half hidden in the glow of the fire. Isolde's smile was thin and cruel. I will accuse her of treason. Of conspiring with Conrad, of leading us into false peace to weaken our guard. The people will not question it, not when spoken by their duchess. And once the bishop lends his blessing, she will be driven from these walls in disgrace. But fate is never blind. In the stillness of the corridor beyond, Miroslava listened, her heart pounding with every word. She had not meant to eavesdrop, yet some instinct, some quiet pull, had led her footsteps there. Now the truth burned in her ears. Isolde's final strike was coming. She fled to her chamber, Adelia waiting within, her eyes wide with alarm at the stranger's pale face. Miroslava, what is it? What shadow follows you now? The girl's voice shook with the weight of what she carried. The Duchess. She will accuse me before all, twist my deeds into chains. She means to cast me out, and if I am gone, Conrad's hand will fall upon this city unopposed. I cannot remain silent, but if I speak, who will believe me? Adelia grasped her hands, trembling but fierce. I will. And Rudolph. And perhaps even Leon, though his heart is torn. You must risk it, Miroslava. Better to stand before them with truth than to be struck down by lies. That night was endless. Miroslava sat by the narrow window of her tower, staring at the stars. She thought of her father's books, of the ruins of her home, of every step that had led her here. She had come in chains, yet found friendship, trust, and even the faint glimmer of belonging. When dawn came, the castle stirred with the murmur of gathering. The great hall was filled, lords, soldiers, servants, and townsfolk pressing close to hear the Duchess's words. Isolde stood radiant in silks, her voice carrying like the toll of iron bells. My people, beware! The girl you hail as savior is no blessing. She is a serpent sent to deceive us. She feigned peace while conspiring with Conrad. She led his mercenaries away not with words of wisdom, but with promises whispered in secret. She has ensnared our duke, blinded him to her treachery. If we do not act now, she will deliver us all into Conrad's hand. Gasps rippled through the hall. Faces turned toward Miroslava, some fearful, some doubtful, some already convinced. And in that moment she stepped forward. Pale but unbroken, her eyes met the crowd, her voice rising above the storm of suspicion. You call me a serpent, my lady, yet I have spoken only truth. You call me traitor, yet I walked into Conrad's camp when no one else dared. You call me curse, yet I have fed your children while you would see them starve on pride. If I am guilty of anything, it is of standing where others would kneel. Her words struck like a sword. The hall shuddered with murmurs, torn between doubt and belief. Leon himself sat rigid upon his chair, his face was gloomy. And so the moment of judgment had come. The Duchess's trap was sprung, the truth was unveiled, and only one question remained: whose voice would the people believe? The great hall of Shtarburg had never held such silence. It was the silence of breath withheld, of hearts caught between doubt and faith. The Duchess's words still hung in the air like poisoned smoke, yet Miroslava's reply had pierced it with the sharpness of truth. Now all eyes turned to Leon, waiting for the Duke to speak, to pass judgment that could either save or destroy. Isolde, her silks gleaming in the firelight, stepped forward with her hand upon her heart, her voice smooth as honey but laced with venom. My lord, do not be deceived. This girl has ensnared the people with clever words, but words are no proof of loyalty. If you love this city, if you love your throne, you must cast her out before her poison roots itself too deep. But before Leon could answer, Rudolph strode forth. His hand clenched around his sword hilt, not in threat but in oath, his voice trembling with passion. My lord, I stood beside her in Conrad's camp. I saw her speak to men who could have slain us without hesitation. No gold passed between them, no secret promises, no treachery, only words of reason that spared us all. If she is guilty, then I am guilty with her, and I will bear her fate. The hall stirred. Adelia, too, pushed forward from among the servants, her young voice breaking yet strong. My lord, she has been more friend to me than many born within these walls. She asked nothing for herself, only for us, for the people. If you cast her out, you cast out our hope as well. A murmur rose from the crowd, first from the common folk pressed at the back, then from the soldiers, then even from some of the lords. She fed our children. She saved us from war. She speaks truth. Leon rose at last, his cloak sweeping behind him, his eyes like fire beneath the banners. He looked first at Isolde, whose beauty was now shadowed by fury, then at Miroslava, who stood pale but unbowed. His voice filled the hall like a judgment bell. My people, you know what she has done. She has given us peace without bloodshed. She has brought bread where there was hunger. She has spoken when others were silent. If such deeds be treason, then may Shtarburg be forever guilty of it. And as for the whispers that would see her destroyed, let them fall silent now. Isolde's face blanched. She cried out, her voice cracking with rage. You would defy your own wife for her? You would shame me before this hall? Leon's gaze did not waver. I would defend the truth, even if it stood alone. The bishop, who until now had watched in silence, raised his staff and spoke with finality. Then let it be known, the Church finds no curse in her deeds. If she carries danger, it is only the danger of truth. And truth, though feared, is not to be silenced. The hall erupted, not in division, but in thunderous cheer. Miroslava's name was cried out by hundreds of voices, echoing through stone until it seemed the very walls sang with it. Isolde's hands trembled, her pride shattered beyond repair. Leon's final command fell upon her like a sword. You sought to destroy what you could not command. For that, you shall be sent where your whispers can harm no one. You will live, Isolde, but you will live in silence, in the convent where envy holds no throne. And so she was led away, her silks trailing like the ashes of a fire burned out. As for Miroslava, she was no longer prisoner, no longer stranger in chains. She stood beside Leon not as a captive, but as counselor, her voice heard in council, her wisdom guiding decisions. And though some still whispered of sorcery, most spoke of her with reverence. In the years that followed, the chronicles would record her not as an outcast, nor as a foreigner, but as something greater. They would write of her as the one who came in chains and left in honor, who spoke truth where none dared, and who turned despair into hope. And so she was remembered as the stranger who brought peace to Shtarburg.